So let's take a look at scene 1. And something that's really important that I want to remind everyone of is the words that Hecate, the goddess of witchcraft, said in Act 3, right? She had a specific line that she used that kind of gave a sense of what the plan would be when Macbeth next came to meet the witches. The goddess of witchcraft says, "Security is mortal's chiefest enemy." What does she mean by this? Security means overconfidence. Mortals are humans. Chiefest means most important. And enemy, of course, we know the meaning of. So she says, overconfidence is the greatest enemy of human beings. And indeed, the apparitions that the witches are going to give to Macbeth here fulfill that strategy, right? In a sense, they bring about Macbeth's downfall because they cause him to be overconfident in his power, and this leaves him vulnerable to attack by Macduff and Malcolm. Let's take a look. Right, the first apparition says, "Beware the Thane of Fife, beware Macduff." The second apparition says, "Be bloody, bold, and resolute, laugh to scorn the power of man, for none by woman born shall harm Macbeth." Right? So a couple things we want to mention here on an analytical level. Of course, we've already said that this is the prophecy that none by woman born shall harm Macbeth. And of course, Macbeth misinterprets this. He says, well, everyone is born by a woman, right? But he fails to consider the fact that Macduff has been born by cesarean section. You know, of course, in a modern audience, we still consider that being born by a woman. But I guess in Shakespeare's day, that would have been considered an unnatural birth. So therefore, it would have meant to be not born by a woman. In any case, a couple things we can point out here. First of all, the apparition or the vision is trying to trick Macbeth, right? We know from what Hecate said that they're going to make Macbeth overconfident. And it's sad on a level because Macbeth doesn't use critical thinking when he's hearing these prophecies. He doesn't think for a second, the witches speak in paradoxes, right? Things have been going not so well for me. Maybe I should be careful to trust what the witches say on surface level. Instead, he takes what they say wholesale, and he doesn't consider that they're also telling him to beware Macduff. If no one of woman born will harm him, and that means no man can harm him, then why would he beware Macduff? Right? So again, the witches are speaking in paradoxes or contradictions. And again, Macbeth fails to see this as a reason to more closely examine what they are prophesying to him. Okay? A couple things about the language. We have the alliteration of B, 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 right? And this alliterated B sound, it creates like what's called a plosive sound. Be bloody, bold, and resolute. So the powerful B sound kind of adds weight to the poetry of the language and to the prophecy of the witches. And again, we're tricking Macbeth here in this second apparition. Another thing that's important that we've mentioned before that I want to mention again is that here Macbeth meets the witches by himself. So when Macbeth first meets the witches, he's with Banquo. We know that Macbeth is not crazy because Banquo sees the witches too, and he mentions the witches later in the play, even when Macbeth is not on stage, right? Such as at the beginning of Act 3, Scene 1, before he's murdered by the murderers. But here Macbeth is visiting the witches, and his behavior has become so erratic, right? He has seen the dagger in his hallucination, and he has hallucinated the ghost of Banquo, that now we kind of have to wonder, is this even happening, or is this all happening in Macbeth's mind? We could imagine a contemporary production of Macbeth choosing not to even have the witches on stage and choosing to have Macbeth crazy, seeing all of this in his head. So again, I'm not advancing that as a definitive interpretation, but the idea is that we don't have a rational person like Banquo here to verify what Macbeth's seen, so we can't help but wonder, how much can we trust this crazy guy Macbeth, who seems to be going more and more crazy and suffering mentally from all of his crimes? Thirdly, When he learns Macduff has fled to England, Macbeth decides he will give to the edge of the sword Macduff's wife and children. Again, we really need to look at this. This doesn't make any sense. If the witches tell him to beware Macduff, he should be careful about Macduff. Murdering Macduff's wife and children isn't going to prevent Macduff from attacking Macbeth, because it's not going to kill Macduff. Instead, it's going to give Macduff a motive to attack Macbeth. Right? Again, we see this motif of doubling and circularity and events repeating themselves. And again, this is occurring in a similar way with Macbeth committing a murder, and he's planning with the murderers to accomplish it yet again. But it's different because it's more and more cruel. He's killing women and children, and his act is more reckless and less connected to even fulfilling the prophecy. So in scene 2, we see the event of the murder of Lady Macduff and her son, and I think I need to stress the importance that unlike the murder of Duncan, which seems pretty connected to fulfilling the first prophecy, and unlike the attempted murder of Fleance, which seems pretty rationally, even if cruelly, an attempt to prevent the second part of the first prophecy from coming into being, this murder of Lady Macduff and her son do not fulfill any prophecy at all. The prophecy just says, beware Macduff, and Macbeth's actions are less and less aligned with what the witches are telling him, and he's more and more free and wrong in his interpretation of the prophecies and his decision to act. Another aspect of this scene that perhaps is worth mentioning is that we see yet another son, right? And as we mentioned earlier in our course, Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, they don't have a son, which seems a problem because how do you pass the crown down? You pass it to your male heir, right? And what's also significant, because Fleance was also a son, but here Macduff's son is very brave. When the murderers arrive, although he's just a boy and he's called young by the murderers, he draws his sword and he attempts to fight them, right? So Macduff's son's righteousness and his bravery, in a sense, they foreshadow that good men of Scotland are not going to stand by while Macbeth commits murder and evil deeds. It foreshadows that there are still strong, brave, good men who are ready to rise up against Macbeth. And I want to mention again that this kind of foreshadows Siward's son. So Siward is an English general who's sent by King Edward of England to fight Macbeth in Act 5. And Siward's son joins the Scottish noblemen, and he actually enters single combat with Macbeth. And indeed, Macbeth does kill him. But there are two brave sons in the falling action period of the tragedy Macbeth who rise up against Macbeth and show bravery, even if ultimately they are killed. Okay? All right, let's move to scene 3. Now, scene 3 is important because we have Macduff and Malcolm talking to one another, right? And just as when we analyzed scene 1, we brought up an earlier quote from the goddess of witchcraft, I want to bring up an earlier quote from Duncan before he was murdered that's going to help us to understand this scene. Duncan says, "There's no art to find the mind's construction in the face." He says this in Act 1. And what he means is that there's no skill for finding what the mind is thinking in the face. Okay? And he says this to explain the fact that he was fooled by the original Thane of Cawdor and by MacDonald. He didn't know that these trusted noblemen were actually traitors trying to kill him. And when he says this, it's ironic because he thinks that Macbeth is a trusted nobleman, but as we find out, and as by now in Act 4 we know, Macbeth is anything but. He's an evil, traitorous man willing to kill anyone to seize power by this point, right? But here in this scene, Malcolm, the new king, is behaving a little bit differently. Duncan is naive. meaning he is a little bit too trusting, and this brings about his own downfall, right? If we were to write a tragedy about Duncan, perhaps his flaw wouldn't be ambition, but naivety. But Malcolm is suspicious. He's seen so many terrible things happen. He's seen Macbeth, the hero of his father's army, kill his father. So he is suspecting everyone, including Macduff. So when we see Macduff and Duncan talk to each other in this final scene of Act 4, before the real tragic conclusion happens in Act 5, we see Malcolm testing Macduff, and this makes him seem like a wise king. Let's take a look. Malcolm tests Macduff by saying, I want to become king, but I don't deserve to be king. So what he's saying is, although I'm the son of the last king, and although tradition would say that as the male heir I get to be king, I'm the Prince of Cumberland, I am a bad person. He says he is full of lust and greed and violence and basically all of the characteristics of an evil person, right? He says he has none of the king-becoming graces. And what he's trying to find out is whether Macduff is going to lie to him and say, oh, you are still the king, I am still loyal to you, or whether Macduff will be honest and say, that's terrible, I can't support you. And so Malcolm says, I have none of the king-becoming graces. I have none of the qualities that a king should have, like responsibility and integrity and loyalty and justice and wisdom. And Macduff cries out, oh, Scotland, oh, Scotland. Macduff cries out that he's lamenting the fact that yet another evil king is going to take over Scotland. And as soon as Macduff admits honestly that he cannot allow another evil king to take over Scotland, Malcolm says, you pass my test. Now I know that you're not just telling me what I want to hear, because I am the Prince of Cumberland, I am the heir to the throne, and I am a powerful man, Duncan's son. You're actually telling me the truth. So now I know that I can trust you, Macduff. Okay, so that's one important moment in the scene, is that Malcolm is different from Duncan, right? He is not as trusting, and therefore not as weak. And also, we learn that Macduff, at least in this point in the play, is a very honest guy who's willing to speak truth to power, right? He's willing to tell powerful people the truth, and therefore he has a lot of integrity. Secondly, an important moment happens when Macduff learns that his wife and children have died, and Malcolm challenges him. He says, dispute it like a man, right? Dispute it like a man, meaning seek revenge like a man. In other words, kill Macbeth. And this is interesting because here Duncan, in a sense, is challenging Macduff's masculinity to get Macduff to help him kill Macbeth. And in a sense, this is a doubling too in a weird way, because who do we see earlier in the play challenging a Scottish general's masculinity to get him to commit murder? Well, we see Lady Macbeth do that to her husband when she calls Macbeth a coward and when she challenges his masculinity and his courage, right? But Macduff says wisely, he says, I will do so, but I must also feel it as a man. Now, what he means by feel it is he needs to weep. He needs to grieve. Macduff is saying that it's not only a man's job to be violent and courageous, it's also a man's job to have a heart and to feel love for his family and to be honest. So Scene 3 is important because it really establishes Macduff as a good guy. Macduff is a hero who loves his family. He's honest to the powerful king-to-be. He doesn't just give in when people challenge his masculinity, but he does what he thinks is right. So a very important scene for developing Macduff's character, and indeed, Macduff is going to be the final foe that Macbeth faces, according to the prophecy, and he's going to be who beheads and slays Macbeth.